Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with the Addy stories. Changes for Addy, Chapter 4, Together. That night, Addy was so excited it took her a long time to fall asleep. In the middle of the night, she woke up. The room was filled with silvery moonlight. Addy sat up to make sure what happened wasn't a dream. She smiled when she saw Auntie Lula and Esther sleeping on her bed. Addy looked over and saw Sam on his pallet and Mom and Pop in their bed. Finally, we all together, Addy thought. We all here. The next day, Esther and Auntie Lula were still asleep when Addy left for school. They worn out, whispered Mama. Be quiet so you don't wake them. Addy bent over and gave both Esther and Lula kisses so light they didn't even stir in their sleep. It was the last day of school before the Christmas holiday, so school was let out early. Addy was in a hurry to get home to see Esther and Auntie Lula before she went out to make her deliveries. But she had something she wanted to do first. She ran into Sarah's house and found Sarah inside folding sheets and stacking them in a pile. Sarah! Addy exclaimed. We found them. Auntie Lula and Esther is home with us. Sarah threw her arms around Addy and both girls tumbled on the floor, falling onto a pile of sheets. Tell me the whole story, Sarah demanded, and don't leave out anything. So Addy told Sarah how glad she was that she stayed so long at the hospital with Mr. Pope. If she had gone to the church any earlier, she would have missed Esther and Auntie Lula. Sarah sighed. Finally, the dream of having your whole family back together has come true. Yes, Addy said, except for Uncle Solomon, it has. She and Sarah sat in silence for a moment, and then Addy observed, Sarah, you got new boots. They're my Christmas gift, Sarah said proudly. My mom and Papa gave them to me early. We earned enough money. Look here, Addy said. I got you a Christmas present, too. Addy pulled a small package wrapped in paper. Sarah opened the package. It was a slate, just like the one that had been broken. Oh, Addy, I ain't never going to need a slate again, Sarah said, and tears began to well in her eyes. Addy put her arms around her. Don't give up hoping, Sarah, she said, holding back her own tears. Maybe someday you can come back to school, but even if you can't, I can help you keep up with our lessons. You done taught me so many things. Sarah dried her eyes. Thanks, she said, holding the slate gently. I'd like that. When Addy left Sarah's house, she hurried through her delivery so she can come back to her family as soon as possible. The minute she came through the door of the boarding house, she would smell supper cooking. And what a supper it was. Mama and Mrs. Golden had made everyone's favorites. Smoked ham, collard greens, rice and peas, biscuits, and sweet potato pudding for dessert. Auntie Lula was too weak to come down to the dining room to eat, so before the family sat down, Addy brought her a tray of steaming food. Addy sat next to the bed while Auntie Lula ate. She noticed that Auntie Lula just picked out her food. Ain't you hungry? Addy asked. Auntie Lula put her fork down and shook her head. I can't say that I am, she said. She patted the bed. Come sit here. I want to tell you something. Addy moved to the tray and sat on the bed. Auntie Lula took one of Addy's hands in hers. When you and your mama left the plantation, I was worried about y'all, she said, but Solomon wasn't. He knew y'all was going to make it to freedom. He helped us, Addy said, but he didn't even get a chance to enjoy it himself. Let me tell you a story, Auntie Lula said. Uncle Solomon celebrated his freedom back when President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. You know the masters didn't pay that proclamation no mind because the South had broken away from the North. Oh, but when Solomon heard about it, child, he came into our cabin and strutted around so proud and happy. And he got down on his knees and thanked the Lord. Auntie Lula started to cough. Addy handed her a glass of water from the tray. Auntie Lula continued, I don't want you to be sad about Uncle Solomon dying, and I don't want you to be sad when I die. Don't say that, Addy said. You're not going to die anytime soon. There's a time for each of us to die, said Auntie Lula. Uncle Solomon ain't have much time and freedom, and I won't either, Addy. We don't all make it when we want to go in life. We start our journeys and have our hopes and dreams, and sometimes other people have to carry on with them when we can't. She closed her eyes and sank back in the in the pillows. I think I better rest now. Addy kissed Auntie Lula on the forehead, turned on the lamp, and sat by her until she fell asleep. 2 days before Christmas, Auntie Lula died. Addy's heart was filled with sorrow. She loved Auntie Lula, who had been like a grandmother to her. Ever since Addy could remember, Auntie Lula had looked after Solomon and her family back on the plantation. She nursed them when they were sick. Like Uncle Solomon, she gave them advice, comfort, and friendship. Auntie Lula and Uncle Solomon had taken good care of Esther when Addy and Mama had to leave her behind, and they had used her last strength to bring Esther back to the family. Now Auntie Lula was gone, and with her death, Addy's dream of having her whole family together in freedom was gone too. Christmas passed quickly. Addy and Esther played with the puzzle Sam had given them as a present. Papa had made a beautiful sled for Addy. Esther liked to sit on it and ring the bell. But the sadness the family felt over the death of Auntie Lula dulled the joy of the holidays. On the last day of the year, the mood brightened as they prepared for Emancipation celebration at church. Papa and Sam left for church right after supper to help set up extra seats. Addy was supposed to go with them while Mama helped Mrs. Golden wash the dishes. But when Mama came upstairs with Esther, Addy was there. She was sitting on the bed in the darkness. She had not even bothered to light the lamp. "Addy, what are you still doing here?" Mama asked. "You ain't even dressed yet." "I don't want to go to the celebration at church tonight, Mama," said Addy. "Why not?" asked Mama. I don't think I can stand up in front of all the people and read those works in the Emancipation Proclamation about freedom," Addy said, her eyes filled with tears. "Uncle Solomon's dead. Auntie Lula's dead. My dream of having our whole family together in freedom can never come true now." Oh, Addy, said Mama with a sigh. She put her arms around Addy. Esther came over with them. She offered Janie doll to Addy. "Here, Addy," she said, "don't cry." Addy took the doll from her sister. "Oh, Mama, look at Esther. We ain't never got to see her first steps or hear her first words. We can't even get back the time we missed her." Mama was quiet for a while, then she said, "Remember what Uncle Solomon said, Addy. Freedom's got its cost. Sometimes a very big cost." Mama lifted the cowrie shell at the end of Addy's necklace and held it in her hand. "You remember when I gave this to you? We were running away from slavery. We had nothing but each other and hope." "I remember," said Addy. "I told you this shell belonged to Papa's grandma, who was torn away from her family in Africa and brought across the ocean to be a slave." Mama went in a soft voice. "The shell was to remind you that we are linked to people in our past forever. They live in our hearts, their lives, and their strength and courage are part of us even when they're gone." Addy took a shuddery breath. She thought about Auntie Lula and Uncle Solomon and her great-grandmother long ago. Mama smiled at Addy. "Do you think you can go to the celebration?" "Yes, Mama," said Addy, "I can." When the church service started, Addy sat in the front pew with the other children who were going to read and recite. She was going to be the last speaker. She sat still and tried to listen carefully as the other boys and girls gave their speeches. Finally, Reverend Drake said, "We are all gathered here tonight to celebrate the anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. It contains some important words that are very important to many who are held in the bonds of slavery. I want y'all to listen closely now. Addy Walker reads the Emancipation Proclamation." Addy's knees were shaking as she walked up the steps to the front of the church. The words she was supposed to read were written on a scroll of paper that she held tightly in her hands. Addy opened the scroll and looked out at the congregation. She swallowed hard. She had never spoken in front of so many people before, and she saw her family look up at her, their faces full of love and pride. There was Sam, who had lost his arm in the war to end slavery, and Esther, whose babyhood was lost to them all. She saw Papa and remembered the night back in their cabin on the plantation when he first whispered the word freedom. She saw Mama, whose hope and strength had never failed, and although they were not there, Addy thought of Uncle Solomon and Auntie Lula too, and remembered how much the Emancipation Proclamation had meant to Uncle Solomon. Addie started to speak, and the words came easily. Her voice was loud and clear as she read the proclamation with words that had changed the lives of everyone she loved. When Addie finished at midnight, it seemed as if the whole church exploded with joy. The bells rang out, not just from her church, but from churches all over the city. Everyone stood cheering and hugging and kissing. Everyone came down the steps and moved into the crowd, standing on tiptoe, trying to find her family. Suddenly she felt a hand slip into hers. It was Esther. Addie smiled down at her sister and said, "Where are we going, Esther?" Esther smiled back. "Home," she said. "That's right," said Addie. "We going home together." Okay, that is the end of the Addie stories. Thanks for listening. I would like to read all my American Girl books. Okay, see you later.